Morning Joe hosted a panel today in defense of Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House. Now, there is an ongoing movement within the Democratic Party to replace Nancy Pelosi with someone more progressive, someone who's more of a fighter, someone who is unwilling to immediately concede to bipartisanship as soon as Democrats win the House. And during this interview, during this panel, someone brought up the Young Turks, but were they referring to us? Take a look.
It's become clear that Pelosi can take a punch, and if you need, if you're going to have somebody go into a boxing ring with the likes of Donald Trump, Pelosi has made it clear that she can take a few swings. In the meantime, no Democratic challenger has stepped forward to run against Pelosi, begging the question: do they have what it takes?
Hi, Steve Ratner in New York. So as it happens, I've seen her a couple times since the election at various events and things, and I think the effort that she is putting in, her energy, her strength, her willingness to talk to every member and try to corral all these people is really quite extraordinary, especially for someone who's 78 years old. It's been amazingly impressive to me to watch her. That said, as you know, there's this group of, I'll call them the Young Turks for lack of a better word. I think there's about 20 of them who've committed to vote against her. I think Seth Moulton is one of the leaders, Tim Ryan. And as you say, they don't have a candidate. But the question is, how does this all play out? She does really have to get virtually all of her caucus. She can only afford to lose a small number to get through this process. How do you see this finally playing out?
Yeah, Steve, I think right now she can only afford to lose about 14 votes or something. And it is said that, as you say, there are around 18 or so dissidents, the young and the restless, or however you want to term them.
So It appears that they were not referring to us at the Young Turks, meaning this news show, but Young Turks meaning rebels within the Democratic Party who want to challenge Pelosi.
Yeah, so there's lots of twists and turns here. Robert Draper might have known about us. That's why he's like, well, I don't know if I'd call them Young Turks, because those guys that Steve Ratner was referring to, Tim Ryan, although maybe the most common TYT guest we've ever had throughout our history, meaning he was probably the one congressman who came on the most. But unfortunately, he has taken a centrist turn. Seth Moulton, centrist. And by centrist, of course, we mean corporate and establishment. And so it's an absolute shame. Tim Ryan came in, a young, aggressive, excellent congressman, but now thinks going more towards the Republicans is the better idea. So those are not us. So the Young Turks that Ratner was referring to are younger members of Congress who are actually more corporate friendly. Whoa. That might have been why Draper was like, well, I don't know if I'd call them the Young Turks. So, now there are three different camps here to get to the substance of this story, and that's part of the conversation as to what's going to happen with Pelosi. The other part of the conversation is the media conversation and why we brought this tape up in particular. We've always told you guys, Morning Joe is the epicenter of establishment thinking. And so the establishment loves people like Hillary Clinton, Jeb Bush, Marco Rubio, Nancy Pelosi. So when Nancy Pelosi is mentioned, everyone on air has an unbelievable agreement fest. Oh, Pelosi, quite extraordinary, I do declare. And she can take a punch and she's tough and she fights. They never, ever, ever give specifics.
Never.
Except sometimes they'll mention the only accomplishment she has, which is that with a supermajority, she was able to pass Romney Care, which is, by the way, yes, it is Obamacare, but it is the same thing as Romney Care. It was borrowed from Mitt Romney in the first place. Congratulations to Barack Obama on that. But by the way, congratulations to Mitt Romney, because that is better than what we had, okay? But it's nowhere near progressive priorities. And so they're like, can you believe she somehow marshaled an overwhelming majority to vote for the predominant priority of the current president, who had a supermajority in the Senate as well, had every branch of government, and barely got Romney care through with none of the progressive priorities like public option, let alone Medicare for all. Well, I didn't know she was that good. But everybody on TV,
right.
This is why the older generation, look, there's plenty of older folks who watch us too, and now it's a lot more dispersed because everybody's going online.
Right.
But the older generation that largely grew up on TV and still believes in things like Morning Joe, they have no idea that Nancy Pelosi is actually a corporate person. They think she's a tough fighter and has gotten a lot of things accomplished. Why? Why do they think that? Because everyone on TV tells them, Nancy Pelosi, unbelievable what she's gotten accomplished. What is it? Name it. God damn it, name it. Nothing.
Well, they also happen to be the same people who have gotten very comfortable with how politics works these days, which is the person who raises the most money, the person who's effective in fundraising is the most powerful, influential person in Congress, but that's just not what progressives want. And so whenever people cite the fact that she raised all this money for the Democratic Party, that argument doesn't resonate with real progressives. And I don't even want to just exclude older individuals who identify as progressives because they're sick of a corrupt political system as well.
Hell yeah.
So don't mention the fact that she raised a ton of money as a reason for why all Democrats should support her. That is it's the heart of what progressives want to change, money in politics. So that does not resonate with people. They don't actually want someone just because they can raise money.
Okay, so now finally the substance of, is she gonna be Speaker of the House? Who's in which camps? As I alluded to earlier, there are 3 camps. So the overwhelming majority are in the normal establishment Democrat camp. And so those are the guys you're used to, Steny Hoyer, Nancy Pelosi, Clyburn, just down the middle of corporate Democratic America. So a smaller group is the one that Ratner was referring to, the Moulton and the Ryans, et cetera, that are even more corporate friendly. And they're like, no, Nancy Pelosi's too liberal. I know, it's literally.
It's amazing.
It's a literal LOL moment. I mean, you can't help but laugh out loud. But on TV, this conversation would shake them to their core. On cable news, they'd be like, oh, somebody thinks Nancy Pelosi is not liberal enough?
You know why? Because we're the real Young Turks.
Okay? Go and tell that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so they're coming at her from the right. And in Washington, since Washington is so incredibly conservative, they think that's the only real challenge to her. They're like, a progressive challenge? What do you mean a progressive challenge? Nancy Pelosi is the most liberal person on the planet, right? So, okay, is there a progressive group? Of course there is. Now, as I love that Laura Ingraham referred to the 4 Just Democrats that won this election cycle, other than the incumbents, as the 4 horsewomen of the apocalypse. They are for Fox News, that's true, in the right wing and the establishment. Anyway, those are all real progressives. There's 3 Just Democrats already in the House, and they're a real group of progressives. But to be fair, like for example, we think Barbara Lee should be the Speaker of the House, but Barbara Lee has not stepped up for that position, right? So we're in favor of her, despite the fact that she's not campaigning for that position.
Can I jump
So that's
in?
a fair point that they made there.
I want to jump in regard to Barbara Lee and why it is that progressives are pushing for her. In case you haven't heard much about Barbara Lee. Barbara Lee was the only member of Congress who voted against the war in Iraq.
And Afghanistan.
And Afghanistan. She was one of the few members of Congress who supported protections for the LGBT community when it was not popular to support protections for the LGBT community. She is a real fighter, she's a real progressive, and she has the track record to prove it. So that's the reason why her name is floating around, even though she has not, named herself as a potential candidate.
So the 2 things that progressives look for is, how progressive are you? Barbara Lee, it's a super easy win for her in that category. And number 2 is, how much of a fighter are you? Well, if you were willing to be the lone vote against the Afghanistan war, there were a couple on Iraq, but the lone one on Afghanistan in the House, well, that shows real strength and a fighting ability. And when Obama and Hillary Clinton finally got around to recognizing same-sex marriage, it was a million years later, and the country had already flipped on it, and the overwhelming majorities were already in favor of it. That's no courage at all. Sorry, it just isn't. That's a fact. Any politician could be for something after 60% of the country agrees to it, although a lot of Democrats still aren't, even on progressive priorities. But Barbara Lee did it way earlier than that, when it was not the cool thing to do. So she has shown strength over and over again. And of course, the simple-minded conventional wisdom pundits on cable news go, oh, so you're against Pelosi because of her age and because of her gender. What? Who said that? Right? We just told you Barbara Lee, and you're like, oh, okay, so you're against her because of her gender. What on God's green earth are you talking about? Because they can only see things in really simpleton ways.
I think it actually goes beyond that, and maybe I'm being too paranoid. I don't know, but my take on the accusations of sexism and ageism is that it's an intimidation tactic for anyone
100%.
who's speaking out, because no one wants to be labeled those things. And so if you challenge Pelosi and you get called a sexist or an ageist, well, then you're less likely to be as vocal or outspoken about it. But don't allow them to intimidate you. We're the same people who supported Bernie Sanders, who again is not, the youngest guy in the Senate. So it has nothing to do with age. It has nothing to do with gender. It has everything to do with substance and the ability to fight.
Yeah, and last couple of things here. First of all, there's rumors out there now that the corporate establishment Democrat trolls and bots are back. And then they're supporting Nancy Pelosi online in a media campaign that if you criticize her for any policy reason, substantive reason, they go on Twitter and Facebook, et cetera, and go, ageist, sexist, right? So the paid bots are back. So that's part of what's happening here. It's a lot of not real people, okay? And it's not just the Russians who have them. The corporate Democrats definitely have them and brag about using them. They have in other contexts, and now the rumors are that they are in this context. Why does Steve Ratner like Nancy Pelosi so much? Well, he's an incredibly wealthy businessman who worked in the financial industry. He's a huge Democratic donor. Well, if you're a Democratic donor who wants to keep your tax cuts and all the goodies that the Republicans gave you, Nancy Pelosi's perfect for you. She's not going to challenge any status quo. She's not going to, upend your boat. So the Steve Ratners of the world are like, extraordinary, right? That's why they love Nancy Pelosi, and she will do whatever those funders want. So, you should know that about Ratner. And finally, so how do the votes work? Because they mentioned the votes. And look, there's first a Democratic caucus vote and then a general vote that includes the Republicans. Pelosi, if she wins the Democratic vote, could lose the Speaker of the House if some of the people voting against her in the caucus then turn and vote with the Republicans. But that's not gonna happen for any progressive. So the fight is within the caucus for progressives. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, et cetera, I would be shocked out of my mind. There's no way in the world that they're gonna turn around and go, oh yeah, then I'll vote with Kevin McCarthy of the Republicans. No way. If a bunch of, I'm trying to spare the adjectives here, but I got plenty coming. If a bunch of right-wing Democrats decide they want to make the Republicans the Speaker of the House, well, I guess that's on them, but there would be hell to pay. So that is not the conversation. The conversation is what's happening inside the caucus. And do I think that the progressives are going to win this round? Well, look, Pelosi's got a tremendous amount of power within the House. So if Barbara Lee doesn't say she's going to challenge her, then she's going to win, yes. But it's important to at least set the standards for what's acceptable and not acceptable. And so once you lay out those markers and Nancy Pelosi does not advance any of the very progressive bills or decently progressive bills, well, then next time around, there will definitely be a challenger from the left and not from the right. Or if there is one from the right, it'll be irrelevant because the left will be far stronger.
The TYT Plus app is now available on iOS and Android. Download to get more TYT content at tyt.com/app.